we are live. Been in the studio for a minute. Like how I could shift it on right there. I got Matt Biermann here from Elite Football Academy, former Mizzou guy. Played some quarterback there.
A long time ago. Well, I got shifted. I got shifted to receiver when they changed systems, but I was not an option guy. I couldn't run the option. I can tell you that.
They Lamar'd you.
Yeah, just not. I was a guy that fairly athletic in my prime, and then certainly didn't have the skill sets enough to be an option-based quarterback. So caught and blocked.
Yeah.
Not very much fun.
But you still have that title, FBS guy. Or back then, what was it called? Division 1A.
Yeah, it was Division 1A.
Yeah.
And, it was cool. We were. Big 12. Well, it was Big 8, then the Big 12, and that was kind of a neat time because things were changing, and Coach Smith did a good job of, he was an interesting guy, but he did a good job of transitioning the program to a little bit better, higher quality, and then you could tell things were changing. I was actually telling someone the other day, I have a shirt still that is the first iteration of like that, the logo we know now, like the more modern tiger head,
the more fierce tiger.
But it was it's pretty funny because it's like the first one, and it looked real similar to the Kansas State Power Cat, and it's kind of this strange. But it was one of our winter workout shirts, and I still have it, but it's a beat up and a little old now, but definitely a different look, and it's much more refined. I see what the kids where they train now and what they get to do, and I mean we had some nice things back then, but like all relative to what they have now. It's not even close.
Well, that's been the major shift is I go down the rabbit hole of looking at all the facilities right now, and one, just the production value of those YouTube channels, and even their own media departments that granted, University of Alabama, you walk through the hall, but just the access you can see with all this stuff, once you add money into it, it's become an investment for a lot of these guys, and Mizzou is right up there, especially if you're going to compete in the SEC, which it's looking pretty good right now.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to get. I've seen it from the exterior, peeked my head in it when I was down there this summer, and the new indoors is off the charts. I mean, it's hard to believe. It's it's just a big indoor space with field, but they left a lot of really cool features, or put a lot of cool features into it that I think the players are really liking, and I've heard nothing but good things from players. And but it's one of those things where it was neat when they got one. They got one right after I left, an indoor training facility, and it was, you always wonder. It's the Rams did the same thing. They built it 80 yards. You're yeah, I know, understand from a practice perspective, but in the collegiately, you need a full size field. I mean, pros have smaller teams, and they get away with things a little bit differently. But I could never understand, you have all that ground and you build an 80-yard indoor. And that's, I don't know what they're going to do with their old one. I would assume the other sports teams will use it.
Yeah, because it's 100, 120 kids on the roster that about, and then the 10 walk-on guys that they forget to put on the on the website.
Yeah, you need to have space to practice. It's one of those things where you look back. I've gone down the last few summers, and they do their little summer camp for the kids. I've taken my son and my son down there, and some of his buddies, and you look around. It's not air conditioned, right?
Really?
And it's just the lighting is a little off. It's got a lot of history, and then they've done a bunch of pro days and things like that. But then you go across the street and you see this, gigantic facility, air conditioned, and lighting's great. The motif matches the workout facility. So it's the money that's being spent is just outrageous, right? And but it's necessary to compete.
Yeah, if you're going to be competing, because everyone wants to make that jump to the SEC or the Big Ten, but if you're competing against the Ohio State University or University of Alabama, or depending on the year, LSU, when they're the top dog, or Georgia, I know we have the SEC patch, but Southeast is a little bit far from here.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how all this stuff plays out with all the conference realignment and destruction of conferences. It's going to be a really interesting next 5 years or so, because of the how the money's going to shake out and what they're going to have to deal with, right? Like
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of things that they have thought through that or are planned and that may not go exactly how they think. I mean, just think about the travel costs for some of these other sports, right?
Yeah.
Like I have a niece that plays golf at Michigan State. She's excited because they're going to have more of a West Coast leg, but I mean they spend most of their time anyway down golfing in Florida. So but it's really interesting to see how that's going to play out. And I mean I think there's a lot of different components going on that might not be easily sorted through.
Well, I think that's something that, like, especially where you're at right now, like the the volume of kids that you're training and whatnot is, I personally feel, and I talk to almost every coach about this who comes on the show, is like these D2s are kind of becoming these feeder schools, and you're the transfer portals, and you take a school like University of South Alabama, and you got recruiters going down there, to be like, hey man, like you still got that year of eligibility left. You want to come to Mizzou, you want to come to Wisconsin, you want to come to X school. And I feel like it has just jacked up recruiting. And I'm sure that's, I know you talk with Mr. JP Rock all the time.
Yeah.
That's his shtick. And the amount of kids you're training is, in my opinion, I just feel like everything is, I don't know how long it's going to take for this to regulate, or is this the new normal?
So that's really interesting because we were talking the other day about this, couple guys, and I think the number was, and I quote me exactly, but let's say in the state of Ohio, it's like 132 kids a year signed to play Division I football.
Yeah,
that's the average over historical average, and last year 80 kids signed Division I. So it tells you transfer portal is definitely starting to impact the kids coming out of high school. So what does that do? That pushes those guys down lower.
Yep.
Which, unfortunately, from an ego perspective, a lot of these kids are not willing to want to go that route.
Yeah.
Right? They think they're higher, and sometimes they are a higher level player. But and with the money in the NIL, it's getting more serious as far as like who's going to go where, and the investment that they're putting into guys. I think it's going to your point, that term, it's going to regulate. Like something's going to have to give. I mean, it's almost like a feeder system is being created, and like a guy like a Cody Schrader is like kind of a good example. Like
I think he is the perfect example.
Yeah. Like he and I watched his recruiting. We were involved. Like I tried to help him out in high school, and for whatever reason, people would pass on him like continually, and you're like, yeah, this guy's like really good. Like he checks all the boxes, and he could do all these things. But he proved himself at Truman State, and now he's proved himself once again in the SEC.
I think you take a guy like Corey Schrader comes to mind, someone who might not be as sexy of a name, but Ben Stratman, who I know he just got a scholarship prior to the season, but obviously another GLVC S&T guy. Like you take guys like that, and I've talked with Coach Ball about Ben multiple times, and Ben's going to be okay no matter what in life. So, football works out great, but it's like, Schrader's going to be at least an NFL look. If he gets drafted in the 5th round, I don't think that would surprise anyone. And, with all these other leagues, like he will be a professional football player if he chooses to at some point.
And I think that's his goal. And we were talking, before about, guys willing to block and do those things, the things that other guys aren't willing to do. He's gritty. He's tough. He's like a guy that I think he's gotten a chip. He's got a chip on his shoulder because, he had an offer, I think it was Northern Colorado in high school, and it dissolved on him like really fast.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things where like, I got an offer from these guys, and then turns out that it was just it was not what he thought it was.
That was probably McCaffrey transitioning, the new coaching change, because Ed McCaffrey became that coach, I believe. And you would think that he may have been more sympathetic to a guy like Corey Schrader, based off his gene pool.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see how it plays out. I think there's going to be a lot of hurt feelings. I look at it from the perspective I was talking to a dad last night about football is a unique game in the sense that it's always been very unique. It's very different than the others, how it's recruited, how the players and the schools interact. But, I know I'm biased, but let's just be realistic. Like, of all the sports that you can choose to play, there's no greater return on your investment right now than being a high school football player with the potential to come out. I mean, we have a couple kids right now that I'm aware of that we deal with that they're going to make serious money coming out of high school, right? And there's other kids where, there's SEC schools that have base salaries of $60,000 a player.
Michigan or Michigan State was one of those schools. I forget. I read an article from The Athletic, like, if you're on scholarship, like, here's 50 G's.
Yeah, right? I think LSU's $60K a kid.
And I mean,
like base salary.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there's the good and the bad of it, but if you're a reserve offensive lineman who starts 10 games, gets their degree in marketing, and you're plus, school paid for, and you're plus, 120 grand after taxes in your bank account, like, I mean, they're not paying rent.
Right, they got their food. They got their food taken care of.
So, I mean, that's 60 grand. Even when you tax it, you're, like, you have some sort of financial literacy. Like,
and you hope that happens, because if it does happen, we're in a good spot, right?
Yeah.
Because then those kids will come out, and if football doesn't work out for them, which we know it doesn't work out for all of them.
Yeah.
But to your point, there are other leagues now that they can be a part of, and I think seeing that is really cool. That so many guys have bounced around. Like, you look at a guy like Mike Glass, who was
friend of the show, Mike Glass.
Such a good guy, and he's a guy that I've worked with him since he's been a young boy, and he's a special quarterback, and it's hard to believe that he got passed over many times, and but some of it was just aesthetically he wasn't tall enough or whatever it might be. But if you're a really good player like he is, and you have a unique arm talent, people find you. And so, like, the fact that he's in Canada now is super exciting. And he just, I mean,
I think based off the way their season is, I think he'll get, and I hate to say this, that, well, for them it's like week 21, but I think he'll get that week 21, like, tryout, essentially, paid tryout. He goes out, he puts together, 60% completion percentage, and, he goes from that QB3 to QB2, and, from there, especially in Canada, the way they run the QB sneaks, he gets 9 touchdowns, 1-yard touchdowns. Yeah. People keep him like a Dakota Prukup, he can't throw the ball worth a lick, but he could sneak it, and
the thing is too with Mike. So when he did I did his pro day training with him, and of course, literally the day that he did it was the day that the NFL shut down everything. So he got a half a workout essentially. But he trained with a guy named Sean McBride, who was a Western Illinois guy who was back playing. He played for the Blue Bombers, and they had just come off the Grey Cup championship. And so Mike was in the facility training with him, and there's another guy, Jalen Ackland, that was back.
The K-State kid?
He's
on the Blue Bombers now.
Yeah, he's Mountain. It was like Mountain Home, and they played at Western Illinois together. And probably one of the best receivers I've ever been around, and just bizarre. Like, you see him, you're like, this guy's a good looking, shape, but doesn't work out super crazy hard, but freakish, crazy good. But so Mike was back training with those guys, and they got an extended stay with, with the health issues and all the things going on in the world, and so his arm is so strong, right? Yeah. So he's a world class. We clocked him at 63 miles per hour. Yeah, that's high level.
You see it in the arena leagues too when he actually dives, can, granted everything's so quick, but that fast twitch muscles of him being able to hit it. Sometimes he'll be a little bit, kind of Rick the Wild Thing Vaughn, but a guy like that when he was playing the arena league, it was quick, and he's just such a tweener.
Yeah, and I remember Sean looked at me. He's like. He's going to match really well with CFL because the field's a little bigger. Yeah. So be able to throw those, sideline to sideline is significant.
Yeah. Well, he'll, obviously with the waggle and the way the things work and everything like that. I mean, like I said, I've met Mike a couple times. He was on the show, and he actually canceled on me because he had a workout. And he felt real bad, and I was just go.
He's such a good dude. Yeah. He's just such a good human being.
He's a goofball, but I know what he wanted. Obviously he wants to go to the NFL, but he was really petitioning to, come back home and play. But I mean, we'll see how things roll.
Yeah.
I mean, he's getting paid to play football right now, and that's, in my opinion,
You've beaten the odds in that
Yeah.
point, right? You'd be able to do that. I think, you know, that's interesting though. But when he's an old era player that came out, and you're just excited to get a scholarship. And now
yeah,
these guys are excited to get an NIL deal,
Yeah.
or and it's the money is real. And I don't know that people quite understand how it really works
Yeah.
and what's going on with it.
I don't think anyone understands.
It's a really wild ride for a lot of these guys, and the significance of the money that's being paid it's going to influence a lot of stuff in the game. So it's going to be curious to see how that sorts itself out as well, because in locker rooms, you have guys getting paid that are performing, and you have guys that are getting paid that are not performing. There's one that comes to mind where kids that I'm fairly intimate with, I know the knowledge of the situation. He was getting paid, let's just call it $25,000 a month, and he's a backup, right? And the starter's getting paid $7,000 a month.
Yeah.
And that becomes a real problem. And then at some point, either someone steps in and pays that guy, or they go to a different team because they have their transfer, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a very real situation.
Yeah.
It's very real.
And I mean, with everything being so open, like with the On3 and, just people leaking stuff, like, I mean, you could start figuring out who's who and who's getting paid and who's getting compensated. And I mean, I'm sure there's some, and I don't know if it's a similar situation, but I can only imagine that the quarterback room in Mizzou could have some, heated, what's the term? Income inequality possibly there. And, I mean, the guy who's taking the reins is taking full advantage of the situation. So, that's something I would relay to that kid is, hey man, you might be making, $84,000, in college, but like it's done for that kid. So he's got to go be an accountant, afterwards. You might not be a star in the NFL, but those $300,000 practice squad contracts, they add up after a couple of years.
Very, very quickly. I mean, it's interesting to see, like, even like at Chase Daniel, look at the career that he had and like what he's been able to do, right?
Yeah.
And so
big Chase Daniel fan over here.
Yeah, he's what's interesting is he's now that he's retired, he's really coming out, and his personality's there, and I think it's interesting to see, and he's obviously very supportive of Mizzou, and he's really been with Brady Cook, been super supportive, and he's very vocal about it.
He's been up there at least 3 or 4 times.
I think he's coming back this weekend for the LSU game.
Yeah, he'll be at Harpo's, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, so he. I was around him quite a bit only because of when Blaine Gabbert was there. Blaine's a kid that I trained since he's been in middle school.
Yep.
And obviously he's doing the backup thing. He's gotten to back up two of the greatest to ever play the game.
Yep.
And it's interesting though, because he's now at that age. He's like 32, 33. His biggest issue is he bounced around with so many coaches. It was like eight OCs in 8 years or some crazy number. And he told me, he's like, I'm playing the best football I've ever played in my life. Like this preseason, he's like, everything's slowed down.
Yeah.
But I think some of that comes from obviously time, and then being in consistent systems, right? And so now, obviously what they ran with Byron Leftwich is different than what he's running with Andy Reid. But stuff you learn from Tom Brady probably accelerates it. And apparently, Mahomes is very intrigued to know what he learned from Tom Brady.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
great.
I mean, you look at Blaine. Obviously, I take a special interest in his career because he did have the mantle of, the dude's quarterback, backup quarterback, especially being a Mizzou guy. And, I've met his middle brother. I think his middle brother's Tyler, because they, I do work in the Ozarks and they frequent down there. And, just a very casual conversation. It's like I always felt that Blaine going to Jacksonville wasn't going to be a thing, and I don't know if Blaine could have ever reached the peaks of Cam Newton, but I definitely felt he could have been like a better version, and more mobile version of Matt Hasselbeck, which some may take as a slight. I don't, and
well, what's interesting is, so years ago we had a relationship with the Rams, and so we would run all their camps. We did all their youth, middle school, high school camps, and So one summer we were running a camp, and Blaine was let's say maybe 4 years in the league at that point.
Yeah.
And one of the Rams coaches was at the camp, and he hung around. And at the end, Blaine was just there. It was just a camp, like a general camp for all the little kids. But Brett Gabbert, his little brother, was there at the camp. So Blaine came out, and he's there. There was a coach that was sitting there at the end, and he was waiting. And he's like, "Hey," he's like, "Blaine, can you take a picture of my kids and sign an autograph for him?" And he was coach for the Rams. And so then I got to know him over the years, and he looked at me one time. He said, "I'm going to be honest with you." He's like, "What we did to him as a rookie is criminal." He's like, "The worst team I've ever been associated with in the NFL."
Yeah.
And he's like, he had a hurt foot. He broke his foot. And they let him keep playing. You know, they cut David Garrard, who was like their star.
Yeah.
And they just pushed him in. And then Blaine got hurt, and it was like, "Hey, you got to keep playing. We don't have any other options." And the unfortunate truth was, then they fired Jack Del Rio, and then they brought in Gus Bradley. Then they fired him, and then so it's just this carousel. But he said that it was the worst team he has ever seen in the NFL, and he's like, and then you put this kid who was young,
he was young
into that environment.
He was young coming out too.
Yeah, and he's he is a really bizarre athlete. He's big.
Yeah.
And he is extremely fast.
I mean, he did showcase that when he was with the Niners, because when he had to replace Kaepernick, like I'm not saying the offense gelled, but it transitioned.
Yes.
Like I think one of his like career highlights is he has like a 50-yard rush against the Bears, and to beat them.
Yeah, that season, I want to say that's when they started doing like all the tracker stuff in the jerseys, right?
Yeah.
And he had the second loss, like he was the second fastest in the league as far as sustained runs over like 20 miles per hour, whatever it was.
Yeah.
I remember Tavon Austin was the only other guy. I mean, he was tied with Tavon Austin, and then some other speed demon was up there. But it's like, he's a quarterback. He's 6'4", 240.
Yeah.
And but yeah, from an athletic standpoint, he's really special, and obviously he's a good human being.
Yeah.
And you don't last in the NFL if you're a jerk, right? You got to be.
Usually not.
You're not hanging around Tom Brady and backing him up and being. If you remember when they were playing, like he would come off the field, he was immediately talking with Blaine, and I thought that was always. I knew that they'd be a good fit just because Blaine's very affable and professional.
Brady also picks his guys.
Oh, yeah.
Like that quarter.
that's not a mistake.
Yeah, like that quarterback room is. Obviously, you pick who you want, and there's a controversy with Garoppolo that Tom didn't want him around, and Brian Hoyer, another probably pretty decent guy, doesn't stick around if Tom doesn't give the blessing.
Very true.
So it's like, I mean, but at the same time, you got to be semi-competent on the field, and he had some good stints with Arians and in Arizona, and I'm sure there's a mutual discussion, and it's never a bad thing to have a local Mizzou kid on at least one side of the state,
Correct.
And it's equidistant from the Ozarks, so he can get down to his
lake house. They're big fishermen too. They love they love fishing, and I think the cool thing is now Brett's coming out. He's got this year and next if he needs it, but he's special. I mean, he's an awesome quarterback. The family's just good people, but Brett is. I mean, he is similar to a Mike Glass. Like he's not his stature. Stature's not as big, but he can flat rip the ball. I mean, he's 75-yard throw. He's got a big arm. He's staying healthy this year, knock on wood, and that's been a really good thing for him.
Yeah.
So Miami's got a good program too.
And the MAC, between him and I know they played Ohio, and I mean Curtis Rourke is another up and coming. MAC guy will probably go up to the CFL and, go on the same tour that his brother did. But, I mean, the MAC is underrated as well. And, I think personally, like, I think Lindenwood is kind of on the up and up. So you might get those, like, St. Louis guys, like, bring up Jordan Cole, who went to NIU. Mm-hmm. Maybe he goes to Lindenwood now because, Lindenwood's kind of on that up and up and everything.
Yeah, I think Lindenwood. I can't speak highly enough with Lindenwood, and we do a lot of stuff with them at the mega camp in the summer, and but I was telling JP Rocket, I were talking the other day, and there's a number of kids that have told me that Lindenwood like is their school. If they
Yeah.
offer them, they're going to Lindenwood. And I know that they're transitioning from that D2 to D1, and like there's guys that are probably maybe not matched for the level that they need, but they're on the team because they're
Yep.
men of their word. That's who they recruited to begin with, and
Yeah.
like that will cycle through. So you have the guys that are probably more suited to what you need.
Yep.
But I can't see fast forward 3, 4, 5 years that Lindenwood's not a powerhouse.
Oh, I mean, I was a little disappointed with the SEMO game. I thought that'd be a little bit more competitive, but I mean, this is the second year in the program. They're 2-2, I think, right now, and I mean, I can't talk highly enough about Coach Stuger.
Yeah.
Friend of the show as well. Clint Sig was on the show and pretty much anyone I've encountered from Lindenwood like has been a half decent human being,
Yeah,
whether it be a
for sure.
player or a coach. And I mean, I think that says a lot about like the buy-in to Stug, one, and two, just them tapping into St. Louis. And I think recently they got 2 East St. Louis kids, and
they're gonna be solid.
Yeah.
One of our coaches, a guy that got his start coaching, like doing skill development with us many years ago, Brian Baldwin. He's like one of the. I mean, he's a phenomenal defensive back coach, but he got hired by Pat Ross, and then he was there for a year.
Yeah.
And then Coach Ross departed, and so they interviewed a lot of the coaches that were on the staff, and so they kept Coach Baldwin. And one of the things that he told me, so I didn't know Coach Stuger at the time. He's the new coach in town, and
Yeah.
he made a comment to Brian that always stuck with me. That I was like, wow, that's different. He told Brian, he said, listen, when we bring kids in, we want to bring these guys in, and we want to focus on giving them the best possible college experience,
Yeah.
right? Well, I got to tell you, most coaches I deal with are not concerned about giving an athlete the best college experience. They're worried about what can you do to help me get to the next position. You know, can you help me win? So if their primary focus is on developing good people and then giving them the best experience possible, I think that's countercultural, and I think long term, the people that figure it out will be there, and it's going to help them a lot.
I think that's also too like tampering the expectation as well. Like something I talk with a lot of coaches is, I talked to Coach B from MBU about it. My boss right now, and he had a kid that like scrapped out because he didn't want to. He knew he wasn't going to be in the NFL, and it's like, if you went to Alabama, you're probably not going to be in the NFL either.
Yeah,
and it's like you still have the opportunity to play this game that's finite, and that's what I tell my kids all the time. I was like, you get 40 shots at this, and then it's done, dude.
Done.
And I was like, some of y'all might not even get 40.
It's funny. I'm coaching my son's junior high team, middle school team, and I've told them, I'm like, look, potentially from this point on, you have, if you're lucky, 60 games in your career left. Yeah. If you get to play, beyond high school, that's huge, but that's rare, right? Yeah. And so, like, you have to take it very serious, but also respect it and have fun with it. But so many of these guys are focused on being the NFL guy. If they don't make it there, they're a failure. And they don't realize, like, that's the elite of the elite.
Yeah.
Any interest in coaching college? That right there, by being, presenting yourself well, the coach saw it. So, I think he's going to have an opportunity, maybe be a GA. I mean, you get a MAC job right out of that's a big deal. Yeah.
I mean, it's especially being young and still loving the sport.
Yeah.
I mean, if any of these kids want to get in coaching, man, and they can get a, good GA job, and, if they can kind of, I want to say skip steps from, maybe the D2, the D3, and go straight to a MAC job, like, I mean, that's 3 years of your life that you don't have to deal with some BS.
Correct. Yeah. I think that'd be my advice too. Is that I've seen. I mean, kind of an interesting story. Like as far as like what we do. Like we've trained obviously a lot of kids over the years, and a lot of those kids have turned into college coaches and NFL scouts and guys working in NFL front office. And I think we take that as a huge badge of honor.
I think I would rather see the polos Yeah, I mean, because everyone does the jerseys, right? But I think the polos
Yeah,
of like
you're right.
the teams you're dealing with,
Yeah.
and like like I think that's a bigger flex because like I don't want to say anyone can go to the NFL because obviously that's not true, but
Yeah.
like I mean you deal with some BS as a scout, you deal with some BS as a coach,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you got a LSU polo up there, and you're like, oh, you train golfers, you'd be like, no, he's the defensive backs coach at
Yeah,
LSU.
which is oddly enough, Robert Steeples is the guy that we started training, and then when he was in high school, we started like when he was a freshman, and then we carried that training and development through his whole career. So my brother ended up representing him as an agent back in the day, and he's a lawyer, so he represented him as his deal with the Vikings and as well as with the with LSU. But getting to see guys like that. Now, funny story is Robert Steeples got hired as the head coach at DeSmet, and his first coaching job and only coaching job prior to that was doing skill development work at elite football, and he was coaching elite flag football at the time. So he went from elite flag football, which is little kid stuff, directly to DeSmet, from DeSmet to the NFL, and from NFL to LSU. Yeah. Pretty good career path.
I will say, like, I think sometimes depending on if you have that privilege and if you have good assistance as well, like being the head coach is less about X's and O's if the program allows. Like, granted, a lot of head coaches are wearing a hat of like, I'm not just a head coach, I have to be the defensive coordinator. Yeah. Then your X's and O's come in, but being a leader of men and manager and logistics coordinator kind of falls into that more. So, I mean, a lot of programs obviously don't have that privilege where the head coach has to be the offensive coordinator.
Correct.
So sometimes it's a little bit more about like, how can I get my offensive coordinator to do the appropriate thing or X, Y, and Z type thing.
Well, so that kind of brings up an interesting thing. So years ago was dealing with a high level like agent, like one of the super agents that used to be in St. Louis, and so we were talking to him about working with some of his guys and doing preparation work for some of his guys, and I made the comment of like, look, you have to understand, like, from our perspective, like, the game is very flawed in the sense that the team is really good at teaching like X's and O's and like choreography phase of the game, but the glaring void that no one wants to talk about is like the skill development side, because so many of these guys are skilled in the sense of like they're uber athletic because they've been gifted or they've worked for a component of it, but the skill, like, you'll still watch NFL games, you'll see certain things where you're like, how are they making those mistakes, right? Yeah. And oftentimes it's because they lack in skills, and they don't lack athleticism, right? But so a lot of the game of football is this choreography phase is what practice is teaching choreography, and then but the dance moves are oftentimes left aside. So we specialize in that. So we were talking to this agent about it, and he made a comment. And he said, hey, I'm going to tell you, what you're saying rings very true. And he said, here's why. What I've noticed the trend in the NFL at the time was these coaches, he's like, I always view them as managers. They're like middle level management, because he's like, how can I have a guy coaching running backs one year and he's coaching D-line the next year and then he's coaching special teams. He's like, they're managing the system which they've been given, right? Yeah. He's like, to think that they're going to go in and improve my athletes' skill sets is probably a little naive, right? Yeah. And so, we always tell people, like, you think like in college there's like this uber amount of like time to develop athletes, right? You don't have the time, right? I mean, even in middle school football, like, the way we do our practice plan, like, we have 8 to 10 minutes of individual, and we move on because we have to get our game plan installed. We have to do everything we need to do to play a game, and so that's where the off-season stuff and doing things on your own comes into play. And I just think that that's a side of the game that gets oftentimes overlooked, because you just see a person catch a ball, or you see a quarterback make a bad throw, and you just assume that that's part of the game. And yes, it is, but sometimes that is something you can prevent.
Well, it's also too, and I don't mean to throw shade at high school coaches, but like, how many of these kids were just bigger than the guy they're going against, and they've been doing whatever they want for 4 years. And, you know, granted, and this isn't a job at like high school coaching or whatever, but, you know, depending on your program, you have someone whose level of investment might not be what it needs to be. So if, you know, John Smith has 5 TFLs and his stance is terrible, do you actually care? Like I care.
Yeah.
Because now he can't do that, you know, at D2, NAIA, FCS, FBS.
And you don't just magically learn those skill sets because someone shows you. Like, and I years ago, there was a young man who was a high-level recruit. I mean, he had offers from all over, and I went and watched the game. And I looked at the guy next to me, and I said, is that his stance? And like, look, I'm a quarterback guy. That's my, you know, I don't pretend to be like a D-line guru or anything like that. But he looked like a frog. He was like literally like hand down, and he was like in a frog stance. And I thought, like, what is that? And so they asked another guy, played in the NFL, stand there. He was like, well, have you ever seen that? He's like, I have no idea what they're doing, right? So he popped straight up, but he was so athletic and bigger and stronger, he got away with it.
And then when you tell them, they make, you know, he gets a sack. Yeah. And then when you tell them, hey, like, that's not going to work, they look at you like you're crazy because then they're like, well, I got the sack.
Yeah. But that worked against a high school kid that also hasn't done a whole lot to develop their skills. So
who leans over when he's kick stepping and literally tripped on them. Like, that's not going to work.
So I think that is so I talked about this just the other day. Like so many times, you know, like, it's good for kids to hear different voices, right? It's good for kids to hear different voices of different coaches. Yes, as a high school coach, you don't want to have too many conflicting views because it can confuse the kid. But at the same time, like, you know, you are a sum of all of your skill sets that you can put. Yes, your athleticism can outweigh a lot of it. But at the end of the day, like what guys are looking for in college, they're not looking for guys that are just the best athlete that's out-athleting people, because at some point the parity becomes so great and so equal that you can't just out-athlete them because they've recruited other people just like you.
Yeah, and that's something that I tell people, like, you know, I'm from New York, so, like, we had FCS, we had D3, we didn't really have any D2s, we had PACE, which is upstate, and even at that level, I used to tell everyone, I was like, I play in the Catholic League, you know, Dean Marlowe was there, Devin Kajus, a couple other guys who, you know, Cups of Tees, Kevin Ogletree, guys who played in the NFL. And when they went to big programs, you know, I talked to them, you know, years later, and they're just like, dude, it was, you know, you realize you're good, but you're not even, and, you know, they go to the high school all-star games, like we had the Boomer Esiason game, and it's like, you think you're good, and then
you realize
you're not even on an all-state team. You're on an all, like, you know, Devin Kajus went to Stanford, you know, played with Andrew Luck, Ty Montgomery. I think Colby Fleener was there. It's like they're taking the best guys in the country, man, and it's like it just shocks these kids. And even at the D3 level, I was like, you're on your all-regional team, dude. Like, you know, granted we don't have a D3 school totally close to us, but if we had one right here at, you know, in Maryland Heights, that's what, 9 high schools within 20 miles that now we're taking the best kids from those 9 high schools. Go play. Like, come on, kid. Like,
I don't know that people quite understand the level of, because you let's just call it 6%. You're taking and squeezing the, you know, juice down to the concentrate of 6% of the best, right? Well, you know, I always say, like, the kids that we train the top 5% of kids, and I'm not saying that they're the top 5% in the sense that they're the top 5% athletically best, but it's the top 5% that actually want to get better.
Yeah, like the kids who, the top 5% of the kids who are going to college, play college football, and they might not be the best, but they
see it.
Yeah, they see that they could possibly do this.
Yes, and I think the cool thing is there is a spot for everybody if you work at it, right? Yeah. If you're consistent with it, if you're consistent with doing the right things at the right time, and you have good motives. Yeah. Like if your motive is to do social media posts, like I saw yesterday, the NCAA or this week came out and they're banning
the unofficial
unofficial.
visiting,
The videos.
I think
and
that's
the,
a Baby
the,
Gronk thing. I think the Baby Gronk had a little
probably
bit
ruined it. Yeah.
yeah.
But the number of kids, and I think it does set up an unrealistic expectation. I mean, it's really just a costume setup, right?
Yeah.
Where they're, and the kids don't realize too, they're doing marketing for that college, right?
Yeah.
Because like the edits and the videos and all that, like we take our 7-on-7 teams on college visits, and we've been to the Purdue's and Tennessee's and Northwesterns and Illinois' and Mizzou's. But let's be realistic. Out of our teams, like typically we have like 3 or 4 dudes like every year, like on our top team, that are being recruited by them.
Yeah.
That's why they want us there.
Yeah.
They're not there for the guy that's probably going to project to a D3 or a D2.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's fun to be on campus. It's neat to see it. It's great to have dreams. But being realistic and knowing that they're not there really to see you. They that's no offense to you. There's just not room for you.
Does that jack up their egos? And is that something
I think it's unrealistic.
Yeah, like do you think it's like, hey, because I'm 5'7", 5'8", switched positions a couple times in high school. When I played semi-pro, I was special teams guy, but it's like I felt growing up I was pretty realistic of like I'm probably not going to the NFL unless I can kick field goals, and I couldn't. So if I were with your kids and I was going to Tennessee and, maybe if I was a little shifty running back or something, like I would realize that they don't really care about me here, and I'm just going to get as many free drinks and free T-shirts as I can. Right. Like, do you have kids? Like, I'm sure you do, but is like the ones that aren't figuring it out, you know what I mean?
I think there's quite a few that haven't figured it out and aren't being – and the dangerous thing is when their parents and themselves – think that they have this aspiration of being an NFL player. And that doesn't mean they can't go D3 or NAIA and come up through the ranks and then be seen. Like I always say, they'll miss you coming out of high school. They do not miss you coming out of college.
They will figure it.
They do not miss. The NFL scouts are really good, and the pro scout guys from the various leagues are very good at establishing who's who. And, by that time, everybody's men, right? They're all the disparity in who was older and who was more mature. All that stuff's played out, and now we're looking at everybody on a fairly equal plane. But I do think that it creates unrealistic expectations. Again, are they having fun with it? Sure, but at the same time, like going into a game day visit versus an official visit is two completely different, components of the recruiting process. And so, we're lucky, like in the sense that we've had so many kids come through our program that like literally like thousands of kids have gone on and played college football. And we've been involved in a lot of that process behind the scenes, and we've seen it happen. And we can have realistic conversations with coaches because, when you have access to kids that you're training, like they don't want to screw you over, so they want to be honest with you, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these guys that we coached are now guys that are recruiting our kids, and I think we're realistic with them too. Like, hey, look, this is what this kid can do well. This is how he measures out. But at the end of the day, like we're not going to sell you to a level of football that's unrealistic for you to accomplish. It doesn't mean you can't change and get better.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, the thing we see, and I'll tell you what I think is the most scary component is when a kid starts getting early offers, like that freshman, sophomore phase, there's this ability or this tendency to want to lay back. Like, oh, I made it.
Yeah.
And it's like they don't understand, like, you haven't made anything.
Yeah.
You've been invited into probably one of the most exclusive clubs in the world as far as the sport we're playing, and you think you have to work less? Like it's the kiss of death. As soon as they stop working, it's done. Like they're stagnant. It's over. Like they not a single kid coming out of any region of the country is so blessed that they can't work. They have to work. Blaine Gabbert story. He says to me one time we're sitting in there and we had a kid that was back. So he's probably like 4 or 5 years into the league at this point, and there was a kid that was I guess he would have been a rookie. It was after his rookie year, and so Blaine's back training, right? He would come back in the off seasons before he's married, he's a veteran. He's made some good money. He started a number of games in the NFL, and he's coming back living in his parents' house, driving their cars, and sleeping in his room that he was from when he was a kid, and working out where he worked out as a boy, right?
Yep.
And so this young man, one of another kid we trained, he says, "Hey, where are you going on vacation? This season's over." And Blaine was like, "That's what I'm doing. I'm working out."
Yeah.
And so this young man divulged, "I'm going to Jamaica. I'm going to here," and he walked off and he goes, "He won't survive."
Yeah.
Right. He's like he doesn't understand. To stay at this level, you have to work so hard.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you can't enjoy life, but if you take your eye off the ball for a moment, and that young man was 2 years bouncing around, and that was it. He was a draft pick too.
Jeez.
So it was just in and out.
Well, especially a guy like Blaine, who at that point in his career, I don't want to come off as derogatory, but was contract to contract.
Yeah.
Like, granted, I'm sure Blaine, nice family, financially was going to be good for the rest of his life with the money he made at that point. But, there's no better job than being a backup quarterback in the NFL. And to go from that to being a hedge fund manager, which I don't know what his major was.
He's a finance guy.
Yeah, so, I'm just going off the Parkway West, Baldwin stereotype.
Yeah, he's a smart kid. He's got good parents.
But, I mean, that's not as much fun as being a professional athlete, of course. So it's like for – Blaine and, who's had all, because it's actually, you can look at Blake Bortles, the guy that after him, like Blake was out of the league. I would argue that in some aspects, Blake was better than Blaine, but Blaine's obviously working at it, made the right connections, and every year, and it's what he wanted to do. And when the chips sail, Blaine will probably end his career with $60 million earned versus, Blake's 35 that he made.
And the funny thing is that Blaine and Blake ended up being friends through Tyler, because Tyler backed up Blake at UCF for 2 years. And then Blake went to the NFL. It's all intertwined. I think it's all like very incestuous. And so some of those stories, I think it's pretty interesting, all that, how it all works together. But he is Blaine is going to be fine, regardless, because he's invested his money. He's smart, and he's just a good person on top. He's got a great wife. They have a baby. He's done it right.
Yeah, but you get what I mean as far as like that kid, like Blaine could have.
He could have easily.
Yeah, he could have been like, okay, even the guy who was with him, Ryan Griffin. Like a lot of people don't. Ryan Griffin is one of my favorite quarterbacks because no one knows who he is.
Correct.
And that guy's made probably almost $10 million. He's thrown 6 passes in the NFL, and you look at a guy like that, and you're like, how is this guy even around? And it's like, hey, man, that guy has to grind. Like,
there's something that he provides of value that they're willing to pay him to do it. And, I think, just looking at, like the whole story of, like,
Josh Johnson's another guy. I talked to Coach Babcock about him, and it was like, that guy's been in, out of 2008.
He was actually, I think he might have been with Blaine when he was out with the 49ers.
I'm sure Josh was out there 19 times.
So, like that whole world, though, of like that contract-to-contract stuff, like, Blaine had that component going on he was involved with Kaepernick when everything went down. So they both, with Chip Kelly, their contracts were, not picked up the next year. They both had, they expired. And, there's a whole story behind it, but he was looking at like, hey, where am I going to go next? And that's a very very scary time for a professional athlete. And not to go crazy into the story, but oddly enough, we had a gentleman that worked for us for a very short period of time that had just moved to St. Louis to be involved with some family business that he had to take care of for a short period of time. And he says to me that he just lets me know that Bruce Arians is his best friend. Right? They went to school together. They played together. This guy still held the Virginia Tech, the all-time interception leader. So he's working with us. He meets Blaine. Long story short, he makes the connection.
Yep.
I get a phone call. I'm not an agent. I have nothing to do with any of this stuff, right? I'm a coach. I'm a trainer.
Yeah.
And I get a phone call on a Saturday of the draft. I'm at a 7-on-7 tournament. It's Bruce Arians. And he says, hey, we want your guy. He's like, we got to connect with them. We're having a tough time getting a hold of him. So they I said, give me a minute. He called Blaine and his dad. I said, call him now. That Monday or Tuesday, he went down after the draft. He wanted to show him. He wanted to throw live for him.
Yeah.
He threw live for him. And that's the kind of guy he is. Like, he could have just signed. But he said, I want you to see me throw and see what your value you place on me. And so he went down, and then I asked him, how'd you throw? He's like, I killed it, right? And I mean, there's that side of being an athlete where you're confident in yourself too, right? Because you've worked for it.
Yeah.
And then that ended up starting a process of he was there for that year. Next year, Arians is out. He retired. He goes to a year with the Titans.
Yeah.
He kind of – there's a whole other story behind that. He played in the play-in game essentially for the wild card, and sick as can be. I actually went to that. I go to very few games. I was at that game, and I mean they showed his face on the screen. I'm like, man, doesn't look good. Yeah, like 102 fever. Like,
you ever hear the story that Taylor Lewan tells about? Hey, Daddy's gonna spin it, and I'm just like.
That's Blaine. That's
Dude, I hear him. Some people might think that's like cringy. I think that's hilarious. Like if I'm Taylor Lewan at that point and some dude comes in that like I kind of don't know, it's like Daddy's gonna spin it. And I'm like, let's do it.
Let me tell you, and that's the funny thing is like he can flat out rip it. Like he like as far as arm talent, like we've had kids come in the building over the years like high level receivers like that have not played with them.
Yeah.
And, like, that's another story. Like, and you see, I'm sure you see it at the school, like, all these crazy drills these kids are doing, like, doing all the, like, silly footwork.
I hate it.
The reality of it is if you get around an NFL or a high-level Division I quarterback, like, they're not playing that game. Like, get to where you're supposed to be, and the ball's coming. So there's a kid, Deion Kane. He plays in the NFL. He came in. He was training. He was after his freshman year at Clemson.
Guy.
Yeah. So he came in, and he's running routes, and I warned him. I said, hey, he throws the ball really hard. And he says, oh, yeah, I'm good. And he's like, I said, no, I'm just telling you. So if he tells you your 8th outside step, get your head around, it's coming. Okay? Like, he does not play games. He rips a ball, and then he comes back. Like, he's caught like 3 or 4 balls, and he's like, oh, you weren't kidding. I said, no. He'll take your head off if you're not paying attention. No dancing. Get to where you're supposed to be. So at the time, I think, Deshaun Watson was his quarterback, and he told me, he's like, Deshaun's more of a touch pass guy. He doesn't throw it like that. And I'm like, and Blaine is all gas. I mean, he has some touch, but he has got tremendous, and he's always had it, right, since middle school, like bizarre strength, arm strength. Yeah. Brett and Tyler both have the same deal. Brett's a little more compact, but he's similar and a lot of gas on the ball. So
I just think I've heard similar stories just from guys who go to once their time is done at school and then they start the hodgepodge of training where you're let's say you went to Cal Poly and now you're training with a guy from Eastern Michigan and you get out of your comfort zone a little bit and one guy I talked to he did the XFL Combine. I know him, helped him out. He played arena ball. He's like, it's just I just felt like I couldn't get my groove right because I'm playing with guy and the quarterback's this or this the quarterback's that, and I'm like, not to be a jerk here, man, but like, what do you think an NFL minicamp is like? And they're like, what? I was like, yeah, they're bringing in Nick Tiano, from the XFL. They're bringing in, a dude who was in the NFL 4 years ago. That's college coach is a quarterback's coach now. They're bringing in young gunslinger from Division II that has this rocket of an arm no one's ever heard about. And then the third-string quarterback who's been in that system for X amount of years. Go out there and run the 9 route. Go out there and run this. Go out there and run that.
Yeah, they don't. That's what kids don't appreciate too. Like, they don't appreciate the fact that like all this craziness you see on these routes and like I mean I have obviously I train quarterbacks, so like the new in vogue thing, and we have a JP and I have a show together, and.
Which is awesome, by the way. You should watch the first 2 episodes.
It's fun. It's something we've been like talking about doing, and then we finally did it. And so it's fun just to get in there and talk shop, just like we're doing here.
Yeah.
But these guys, these Instagram quarterbacks, they're having these kids drop their arms down and do like things that are they're not repeatable. They're not biomechanically friendly. They're not like like, yes, I understand at some point you have to be an athlete, but training kids to try and be that when it's, like I'm watching kids throw balls to their right and their body's here and they're here. But the reality of it is all they have to do is turn themselves to get in alignment with the target. So my son, who's in 7th grade, the other day I had him watch a particular set of videos, and he's learned enough. Now he's a little biased because he's been trained, for a long time now, and he's like, Dad, this is ridiculous.
Well,
like, why are these kids doing this?
Well, I think Mahomes has ruined that a lot, and I don't, obviously he is en route to being one of the greatest quarterbacks, if not the greatest quarterback in our game. But when he went on the Netflix show, The Quarterback, he trains his body for that.
Yeah.
And I think that just, like you said, every innovator, because, I feel like a lot of coaches, they want to be McVay, they want to be the innovative guy who does this and that, and the Shanahan. And I'm like, hey, man, like, you get 4 yards of play, you do that all the way down the field. Eventually you score.
You move the chains.
Yeah, and maybe, I'm a little bit biased because we ran T formation, wing T until my junior year of high school, and a couple of my coaches and semi-pro were Naval Academy guys. So what did we run?
Right.
Especially when the offensive line was on the deployment next week, and then we had to keep it simple, stupid, or keep it stupid, simple, or whatever it is. But I see some of these drills, and I'm not a quarterback and whatnot, but I mess around and throw the ball in the sidearm, and I've had 2 dislocations in my shoulder, so I get fatigued a little bit easier. But I'm like, why are these kids doing this? This just reeks of UCL tear.
It does. And what's the other thing that's really bizarre too is like everything that we do from a throwing mechanics standpoint is based off of your lower body. If you watch a lot of these guys, there's no extension from their lead leg, which would be, for a right-hander is their left leg. And you see these kids actually like crouching down when they're doing it, and they're trying to put all this energy out of their core. And the reality of it is I always tell kids like, okay, how much do you crunch?
Yes.
You can't it's your legs that do the primary lifting. It's your legs that do the primary force production. It's ground force production.
Yeah.
So to teach these guys to be, to get in these strange positions, sometimes you just got to let your natural athleticism in those scenarios take hold.
That is what we used to call the intangibles.
Yeah, that's your God-given component, right?
Now they call it tails and traits or whatever.
And the reality of it is like a lot of it's just it's fabricated for internet.
Yeah. Well, I think, and also father time. I mean, eventually at some point, like, it's no different than Favre. Like, you can zip it in there, and then eventually, like, the zip doesn't zag, and
it doesn't translate. I mean, I talked to we train hundreds of quarterbacks, right?
Yeah.
From little bitty guys up through collegiate guys, and we've had pro guys. And the reality of it is, they have to be good at like the game, right? So like a 3-step drop coming off on tempo, right? Catching, throwing, right? Quick game. They need to be good at a drop with a slide to the right, or slide just slightly move the pocket. I mean, we spend an inordinate amount of time of teaching kids how to move inside the pocket, right? Move and slide their feet, and get in position, because your first inclination as someone getting pass rushed is get out of there, right?
Yeah.
Well, reality is that the offensive linemen are being taught how to block, and we tell most of the time, like most of our sacks for high school kids or middle school, they're self-imposed.
Yeah. They just roll out.
Yeah, they move. They get on the wrong side of the block, right?
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time teaching them how to center themselves behind the lineman, right, and not get too high or too. It's one thing to step up in the pocket. Well, if you step up even with the pressure, they're gonna get shoved into you, and the lineman's gonna feel bad about it, but it's your fault. Yeah. So, I would rather spend time on teaching someone the mechanics of the game than some wild, moving to your right, things that we can't even replicate. Like, it's funny. Like, we work off balance throws, right? Because there are off balance or situations where you're not able to get your shoulder back to your target. But that's all derived from your feet. And I don't see I see a lot of guys teaching arm angle And arm angle is strictly dictated by your feet. So Patrick Mahomes is a great example. When he's off balance or he's off base or off schedule, whatever you want to call it, if you look at his right foot, it's always pointing to the target. He's not making any magical throws. His arm isn't supernatural. His feet are always good.
Yeah.
He's very athletic with his feet. And guess what happens? The ball goes where your feet are. So it's like when you walk, your body goes where your feet are. I mean, it's the same. Yeah. Where your feet are when you run, that's where your body goes. So, we're not dealing with guys that are like, yes, he is uber athletic, but if you break down the mechanic, and then what's tough is what I see guys teaching young kids that's not what even what he's doing. Like that's their false attempt to look like what he's doing and
to look innovative.
Yeah, to look innovative. And the sad thing is, and then they're trying to call it, whatever their method is. And at the end of the day, like, I talked to enough college coaches that would back it up and say, we want nothing of the sort. Coaches want regimen. They want predictability. How do I teach you? How do I teach you where the ball is supposed to go if you're doing something different every single time? Like it's not feasible.
Well, not only that, like that's not what the scheme dictates is going off script. Like that's just, I mean, years upon years. Like realistically, what most kids start 17 games their college career. Like they come in, if they're real good, you'll get your freshman, but they're leaving their junior year. Maybe a sophomore kind of steps it up, halfway through. Like it needs to be very plug and play in college. And like obviously at the NFL level, like Travis been there since 13, Pat's been there since 17. Like it kind of, the system is built around those guys versus like, there's no, like Blaine comes in, they're probably changing things up, like perfect example. You got, Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis. Gardner Minshew comes in, a little different.
A little different scheme, It's just different things you're asking them to do. I mean, I watched actually one of the Colts, one of their plays with Richardson, and they ran like a QB lead, or that was like a guard. They pulled the H or in the guard, and then it's something I'm running in middle school, right? Yeah. Like when the quarterback can run, right? Yeah. So they're doing that, but you're not doing that with the old grizzled veteran because there's only so many times you can get him hit, right? I mean, like at some point, like you have to be realistic about your personnel, but I do think like, as a coach, and this, like I call a play. I know what we're looking at defensively. Like I know where I want the ball to go or where it should go. Yeah, things do change into play with the blocking scheme or someone may, especially like the younger ages, high school and middle school, people aren't where they're supposed to be sometimes. Yeah. That can happen in college.
It happens.
Yeah, it happens. And you're like, that guy wasn't supposed to be there, but he is there, so now you have to adapt. And so I think setting up those standards, and so that you can coach back off of that, and that's no different from the throwing mechanics. So like if a kid misses high or low, we know the failure modes. They miss left and right. We know that. We know why they're missing. And so our job as coaches is to teach them how to fix themselves, right, to self-correct on the field because, after all, the coach doesn't care. Yep. He says, that guy was open. Like, you should have thrown the ball to him. Well, just because your feet weren't in position or your eyes weren't where they were supposed to be, like, that's your fault. That's a mechanical flaw. So that's what you teach so that they can see what's available so they can just throw it, right? It becomes automatic. And I think the hardest thing is when you start involving yourself in things that are not repeatable, that are fancy, like and cool and hip. Yeah. It's gonna lead to a generation of guys that don't know how to actually play the position. Yeah. So
I think that's a good way to end it, kind of a little bit sullen towards the end, but where could they find Elite Football Academy and you and JP?
Yeah, so Elite
drop all the links.
Yeah, so Elite. So on the easiest is on the website, it's elitefootball.net, and then we have on our social media, it's, Instagram's Elite Football Academy, and Twitter is Elite Football. So just pretty. If you type in Elite Football, you're probably going to find us. We train throughout the year. We do private training. We do small group instruction. We do a lot of performance training as well, so we have a whole arm that does that. And then we have full medical suite with our sports medicine doctors and physical therapy. So it's pretty much a one-stop shop. It's taken years to get there. It's not just something that happened overnight. And then, JP and I, on our show, we'll have to have you come on.
Yeah.
Football 360 show. It's new. It's only 4 episodes in, so we're learning, and it's a lot of fun though, because we're just talking shop like this.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's
guys that are there's only so many people that really love football enough to sit and talk for hours about it. I mean, I'm happy enough and lucky enough that I get to do it every day of my life. And I had a practice last night, and I got done, and then I went and trained a young man, and I got home late, and then I had a phone call with a parent. And my wife looked at me. She's like, "Do you ever get tired of talking about this stuff?" And I looked at her and I was like, "No, actually, I don't. I really don't." Yep. So I get to love it. So I appreciate you having me on and getting to talk shop with you.
Yeah, and we'll continue to do it. Come out to the facility. And special shout out to Kevon Gaines, Josh Munn, Blake Height, all MBU guys who work for you and work with you.
Awesome guys.
Yeah,
cannot say kids. It's neat to have young men that are dedicated and spending time giving back to others and doing a darn good job of it.
Yep. But thank you for coming on, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Can't wait for more. Can't wait to do it.